Hi, and welcome to the demo about the Sveltos dashboard. In today's demonstration, I would like to show you how easy it is to provide different permissions to different personas within a Kubernetes cluster. Effectively, what I would like to cover today is show you how to give permissions to the platform administrator to see all the clusters within the Sveltos dashboard, and how you can provide permissions to a tenant administrator to see only clusters within a particular namespace. For this demonstration, I've already installed Sveltos within a management cluster, and I've already registered 2 managed clusters. Now, if you are not familiar with Sveltos, the Sveltos installation process, or how you can deploy the Sveltos dashboard, don't worry about it. Have a look within the Sveltos official documentation below section Getting Started Installation, and you will find all the necessary information to do that. Now, let's get going and let me show you the view of my management cluster. So I'm already connected to my management cluster, and I've already registered 2 managed clusters, the BLN01 and the BLN02 clusters that have been registered within the 2 different namespaces that you see here. Now, how the end users were able to interact with Sveltos before the Sveltos dashboard, and that was with the use of the Sveltos command line. How that looked like. It was similar to the view here. So I have the command line as a binary, and I do show add-ons. So effectively, I can see all the add-ons and deployment that have been deployed with Sveltos down the managed clusters. Now, if you think about it, if you have hundreds and thousands of managed clusters, that view can be really hard to see what has been deployed where, and that is the reason why the Sveltos dashboard was created. Now, how can we provide permissions to different roles within a Kubernetes cluster and allow them to see what they are allowed to see, right? We will do that following a 3-step approach. First, we will create a Kubernetes service account. Then we will create a cluster role binding or a role binding and associated with a service account. Last but not least, creating a token. The token will be used to authenticate with the Sveltos dashboard. Now, we're going to start with a platform admin. As I mentioned before, let's create a service account. Let's create a cluster role binding and associate it with the service account platform admin, and provide the cluster role cluster admin so we can see all the clusters that have been registered with Sveltos. And now let's create a new token that is valid only for 24 hours. Let me paste the command and let me copy the token. Now let me pivot back to my browser, and here you can see how this Sveltos dashboard looks like. And for this particular instance, I'm only exposing the dashboard UI with a load balancer IP address. From the first page of the Sveltos dashboard, or the first view, is the Sveltos cluster. So you can see all the clusters that have been managed and registered with Sveltos alongside your management cluster. If I had cluster API clusters, I was going to be able to see here, but for this particular demo, I do not use any of them. Now, if you have more than 3 clusters that you manage, I find it very, very handy to use the filter option, so you can filter by name, by namespace, or by the labels that have been associated with the cluster. Now let's have a look to the BLN01 cluster. You can see on the top we have the version of that cluster, 129.2. The cluster has been registered within the BLN01 namespace, and that the health of the cluster I set here, so my cluster is healthy. A bit further below, you can see all the labels associated with that particular cluster. And last but not least, we have the add-on section. Basically here we have a holistic view of all the deployments and add-ons that have been deployed with Sveltos. Here we can see that we have 2 Helm deployments, one for Cilium and one for Cilium Tetragon within the kube system namespace. If I pivot to the cluster profiles, you can see that the 2 cluster profiles have been provisioned successfully and they're in green states, while on the resources tab we have all the resources that have been deployed with Sveltos. Following this particular deployment here, you can see that most of the configuration reflects to Cilium Tetragon and reflects the tracing policies that we want to deploy down that particular cluster. So a single pane of glass for all the clusters for the platform administrator. What about the tenant admin? And let me go back to our terminal. Again, we're going to follow the same approach, the three-step approach. Create a service account for that particular tenant and specify the namespace that we want to have access to. Now let's create a new role binding. In the same namespace, associate with the cluster role, cluster admin, and associate with the service account, BLN admin, BLN02. And let's create the token now. Let me copy the token and let me go back to the UI. Let me paste the token, and what I expect here to see is effectively that service account only has access to the clusters within the namespace BLN02. And that's exactly what we see here. If I click to the actual cluster, the view is pretty similar like before, but for the BLN02 cluster, I've already deployed Cilium Tetragon plus Prometheus, Grafana, and Loki. Before I conclude the demo, I would like to also demonstrate how an error of a cluster profile deployment looks like within the Sveltos dashboard. And what I'm going to do here, I'm going to try and redeploy or try to deploy again Grafana Prometheus on the BLN02 cluster. So what I have here, it's another YAML definition with a different cluster profile name, but I will try to deploy the same Grafana and Prometheus resources on that cluster. What I expect to happen is Sveltos to say, no, those resources have already been deployed, so the cluster profile with the name Prometheus Community 6020 diff will get an error, and we will be able to see the error in the Sveltos dashboard below cluster profiles. And here you go. The cluster profile with that name is not deployed, right? It's in red state, and if you pivot here, you can see why. But basically, we've already deployed those resources. Sveltos will not deploy the resource again for that cluster profile. That concludes the demo for today. Hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions or issues, feel free to have a look at the official documentation by clicking the link here. Feel free to join the Sveltos Slack channel. And if you have any feedback or recommendations or maybe ideas on what you want to see within the Sveltos dashboard, feel free to use the option here, or even feel free to provide your feedback within the Sveltos Slack channel. Till the next one, thanks for watching.